Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Viewers Club. We are today going to be talking about a very, very, very special subject.
Ooh, special.
Special indeed.
Double toil and trouble, here it is.
Fire, burn, and cauldron bubble.
No.
I'm quite insane. So, hello everybody. My name's Lucas. And it's just me. So, I'm the only one today. Nobody else is here.
Tax wife number one first.
Nobody
That
else is
would
here
be
today.
me. I'm Tess. And
That's just a
tax wife
ghost.
number 2.
My name is Megan. Hello.
This is like
me.
the most chaotic intro we've
It
ever
really
done.
is. I think it is.
Honestly, I think they just get worse and worse.
They do. They just go downhill. I don't think we've never improved, and we always say that we will. We're like, we'll get it next time. And then,
We'll do better.
well, anyways,
I love it.
back to, I guess we have a podcast. I don't even know anymore. So,
We have a YouTube channel.
I guess we have, yeah, you know. So today is a very, very, very special episode. We are going to be reviewing the entirety of the Lord of the Rings series. Now, Megan, you have a special announcement.
I do. We're doing this episode not because it really pertains to anything Halloween related, although there are a lot of creepy elements and it's fantasy, so it could be Halloween themed, but not really. No, the reason we're doing this is it's my best friend Hannah's birthday today. Happy birthday, Hannah.
Happy
birthday,
birthday.
Hannah.
She loves Lord of the Rings. It's her favorite book series. It's her favorite movie series. She just absolutely loves it. And because her birthday actually falls on a Sunday, the Sunday that this is being released, I wanted it to come out. And I'm like, it's never going to happen
It's
again.
meant to be.
So it's meant to be. So
That's fate.
that's the reason I begged these guys to do a Lord of the Rings episode, which wasn't that hard because Lucas is pretty obsessed with the franchise as well.
Yeah, I have a mild obsession. I don't know.
You guys should see his room
Word.
right now. It's like covered in Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
I'm just
It
kidding,
was-
it's not.
That's right. Looks just like Gollum, doesn't he?
You know, I've heard that
Schmeagol.
before.
Precious.
Stop.
Well, anyways,
No, don't cry.
yes, indeed, it is true. I am a complete Lord of the Rings nerd. I don't really remember a time when Lord of the Rings wasn't in my life. Lord of the Rings, and just brief, right before brief note before this episode continues. This will be discussing the Lord of the Rings movie series, so we won't touch on the books as much. We might reference them, but it's more so a review of the Lord of the Rings series. And I believe it's just focused on Fellowship
three
of the
originals.
Ring, Two Towers. Yes, so not The
Yes.
Hobbit.
Mhm.
That
True.
might
We'll
be
talk about
another
we'll talk about the Hobbit next time.
Yes.
Yes.
But yeah, this is focused on the movies. And the movies came out in 2001, 2002, and 2003. So basically all around the time of my birth. So I don't remember a time when this wasn't a thing. And my parents own all of the movies, and then recently we got the extended edition of all the movies because we had to. We had a big marathon, and it was great and fantastic, and it
There's only one
yeah,
There's only one way to watch it, and that's the extended version.
it's
Too
true.
bad I wasn't able to get Tessa the extended version. I didn't have the
okay.
extended
worth
ones on
it.
DVD.
It's
It is
okay.
worth it.
We will have a movie night in the near future.
Yes, we must.
We'll spend 12 hours watching those 3 movies.
Kind of a
You think that I'm lying, but
no, we're gonna force
I
you
don't.
to. I would say it's notable for being an adaptation of such a massive book series where they did it in
Mhm.
that fashion, where they split it up into a trilogy, and I'm pretty sure that there's only like one chapter that, like, Tom Bombadil, like, that's the only section of the book that wasn't included in the movies. And of course, there are fans today like, oh, they didn't include Tom Bombadil. It's, like, the best part. It's like, shut up. So,
Oh boy.
anywho, I'm not...
That's rough.
That's, controversies aside. But yeah, it was definitely notable for being, you know, like the first time when they took when they took the idea of adapting a massive story into more than one movie, or into more than one movie, or into something like a series, because I think people didn't really, I don't know if they thought that would work, that they were like, people aren't gonna keep going back to the movies to see this. And in that way, that kind of bridges into this other thing I want to talk about. So I think we can all agree that Lord of the Rings had a massive impact on fantasy, on the film industry in general, and on how stories are told. And I kind of just wanted to talk about that and hear your opinions on how that happened, or different aspects that you can think of on, you know, because I think the main one that comes to mind is Game of Thrones and the success of Game of Thrones. Because I personally don't think that Game of Thrones would have been not enjoyed as a series. I don't think it would have been greenlit as a series had Lord of the Rings not succeeded in the way that it did. Because fantasy didn't really have a good track record as far as a big box office movie, and you know, this like broke all of the different, you know, biases and prejudice against a big fantasy movie, especially in the eyes of the Academy, since Return of the King is tied with Titanic and Ben-Hur for the most Academy Awards won by a movie. So I just kind of wanted to hear
as well.
Absolutely. So I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on that idea.
I mean, I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. I personally believe Lord of the Rings is the best fantasy series ever. Honestly, I don't think anything compares to it. It's so detailed. There's so many characters. The world is so well-rounded. And I personally have not seen a fantasy film that holds a candle to it, honestly. This is where I'll touch on The Hobbit very briefly, because I saw them recently in while I was preparing to get ready to watch the Lord of the Rings series. And The Hobbit was kind of comparing it to Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit standalone is enjoyable, I think. You know, I think it's an enjoyable series, and I'm not saying that I hate those three movies, because I do enjoy them. But compared to the original trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, I don't love it.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I feel like, in personal opinion here as well, I feel like a lot of fantasy is trying to emulate what Lord of the Rings did, you know? And I think that they fall short a lot of the times. And I don't know, I just think Lord of the Rings was able to pull something off so well. They had the right actors at the right time, they had the right storytellers, they just had the right people at the right time to create, in my opinion, the best fantasy franchise or fantasy series out there, personally. That's just personal opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's something like so nostalgic about the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and like what Megan was sharing, how it was just like the right people at the right time, and I don't know, it just worked. And I also just love like really being immersed into fantasy films and stuff, so it was really an enjoyable film series.
I love what you were saying about immersion, because this film does that so well, where you feel like this is a real world, and this, we are seeing into Middle Earth. Middle Earth is a place that exists, and we are looking in on the stories of these characters. I love that it seems like it's on this big grand scale, but there's like simplicity to its extravagance and simplicity to its complexity, where even though it's this massive big world with different languages and different laws, those different kind of the rules of the world are laid out in a way that helps the reader make sense of them, and it's treated real enough where it doesn't feel like it's this big, weird, complex thing. It feels like it's this world that you can understand and really get lost in without it being too confusing.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I loved The Witcher, but I feel like The Witcher, it takes place in a fantasy world that has kingdoms, with these complicated names and these different languages and cultures. But I felt like the way that it was presented in The Witcher, and in a lot of fantasy shows and series and movies that, like you said, Megan, are kind of trying to emulate that feel of Lord of the Rings, they do fall short of that immersion aspect of the series. And I don't know if it's just in the way that it's presented, or in the way that we understand the characters, or in the way that we travel with the characters, or in the way that we're presented the world itself. But it's definitely, this is one of them that did it right. And it might be the fact that I appreciate that the story starts with the hobbits. And the hobbits are a lot like the reader, because the hobbits have only ever known the Shire, and they're only ever familiar with it. So when we're introduced to the world, we're really introduced to it through their eyes, through the eyes of Frodo and Sam, because they have notions of the elves, and they understand that, and the audience understands those concepts as well, of what those are. But they really only they understand it on a similar level to the hobbits. So it's kind of cool that we're introduced to their world, and then from their view we're introduced to everybody else. I agree with both of you. It did a fantastic job with immersion and with not making it like overwhelming to understand. It felt magical and yet real. If you can't tell, I love the movie.
Yeah, and it was also like they weren't trying to make it fantastical or whatever. I feel like they were more so just like being fantastical. Like they already had this world created, and by the time the viewers dropped in, I love the point that you said about like the audience being like having that connection with the hobbits because they only have like so much knowledge, and then just seeing how their world like is already functioning and how it has been functioning is a huge thing, instead of like, oh, let's create it as we go type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think what aids to that is that the world is the thing that is this huge force in the story, but the actual story is very, very simple.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the main point is to destroy the one ring of power. That's even the more complex version of the simple version. The simple version is they're trying to keep a bad person from gaining power over the rest of the world. That's the simplest version of the story. When you break it down to its main components, that is the goal of the story. That's the goal of the fellowship, throughout the entire series. And then it's just the elements that make it such an amazing fantasy film. That's the element of power is the ring, The main bad guy is somebody you don't even see very often. Sauron is mentioned. You see him at some points, but he isn't like the darkest force out there. He has henchmen who come, and it's just a simple story of this small band of people trying to save the only lives that they've known. Yeah. Which is what I think it makes the very ending of The Return of the King so powerful at the very, very end. And I say that because in the end you have two different stories, two different paths that are taken from by Samwise and Frodo in particular, The whole point of the entire story in the beginning is to save everything that everybody knows and that everybody loves, That's the simple story. But in the end, what makes it so well done is that Samwise goes back to that normal world, you know. He gets married, he's happy, he's celebrating, but then Frodo has been corrupted by the world that was around him. You know, he can't go back to living a normal life like a hobbit. So he leaves to go with the he leaves the Shire, you know, and he goes to the elves. And that's the ending, because he can't stay in the Shire anymore, because that world has shown him how, one, full of adventure it is, and then two, how dangerous it really is, and he can't just sit there. And I think Bilbo goes through very similar things. And again, this is going back to The Hobbit, but it's a very similar storyline, you know. But he does leave with Bilbo. You know, they both leave the Shire because they both know that the Shire is kind of this like isolated world within a world. Yeah. The rest of the world keeps moving on without them. And I think that's what makes it such a powerful story, is how simple the main story is when you break it down, and then how complex and meaningful the different endings are for these people, you know? Absolutely. That's why I just love it.
Absolutely. It has a really big focus on character and on how the characters feel and how they are affected by the world. And I think that was another draw-in for people who weren't into fantasy, people that had never, you know, touched the genre before. They were able to relate to it in a way that they hadn't been able to before, because they could see themselves in these characters that didn't exist in this world that, you know, was full of magic and monsters that weren't in this world. And, you know, the author, J.R.R. Tolkien, he really wanted, I think he set out to do that. He wanted to make something that, even though it was set in this different world, still maintained that humanity. It seems like he took a lot of his inspiration from his experience in the war, and I think that really comes through not only in how the battles are displayed, but also in the way that the characters are affected by it, especially Frodo and Sam. I think their experience probably echo a lot of the experiences of the soldiers that went off to fight, and then how their reaction to the horrors of the world affected them and how they dealt with it. But going back to that ending, I love that ending, and I love the bittersweet nature of it, because I think a lot of people would have gone with like a happy ending, or they might have they had the ability to go with this happy ending where all was fine and Frodo was fine and they all lived happily ever after. But it was truthful. It mirrored life, and life is bittersweet. So I appreciate that when you see that in actual stories. George R.R. Martin, he himself was an incredible fan of The Lord of the Rings, and he said that story shaped how he wrote and how he liked stories and how he experienced stories. And he said that ending in particular, that it was bittersweet and that not everything, he said that stuck with him because that was very much close to life. I would like to point out real quick that another connection that I thought this was hilarious and really cool, actually. So another thing that George R.R. Martin said inspired him and stuck with him after he read the Lord of the Rings series as a child was the death of Boromir and the death of Gandalf. Well, death in parentheses of Gandalf, but the real death of Boromir. He said that really stuck with him because he'd never seen a story where a character, like a main character, died and went back, like a character that you still cared about, that you understood was human, but ended up kind of in that moment faltering and going to the dark side, and then and coming back. But he said that was a very three-dimensional gray character, and then his death was very effective. But I love that his inspiration because he said then that reason is another reason for why Game of Thrones has so much unexpected death, and has so much where the idea of you never know who's safe. So I love that the character that inspired him to create this story was played by Sean Bean, who then played another character in George R. R. Martin's series that ultimately met the same end. So I just love that he ended up playing that. I love that Sean Bean was a part of both of those stories in a way that connected both of the authors. I thought that was cool that he that as fate would have it, he ended up connecting both of them. Now that we're on the subject of characters, why don't we talk about the amazing cast?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god, yes.
So,
Yes.
first of all, Sir Ian McKellen, the god,
My hero.
the legend.
I love him. He's
Just-
amazing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, he's born to
He's
play that role.
iconic.
I can't see anybody else doing that role. I can't.
No, absolutely
I
not.
don't want to.
No, I don't
Never.
want to either.
Ian McKellen will be my Gandalf from here on till the end
Yeah.
of time.
Mm-hmm.
And to give props to Ian McKellen, it is not just because he plays Gandalf. It is every role that he does.
Yeah.
He is amazing.
Oh yeah.
But in this case, because we're talking about Lord of the Rings, his Gandalf, I cannot think of any single person who can play Gandalf the way that Ian McKellen does. It's just, love it.
Yeah, he portrays all the elements of this wise and kind and sometimes stern, but always, caring, this such a complex individual that you just love. And God, what a voice. Like, just the way he says every line is perfect.
Him and his character are one of the best things in the entire franchise overall, because he's a very complex character.
Right.
And he just remains a very complex character throughout everything.
For a long time, I thought that because of his role of Gandalf, I was convinced that he was also Dumbledore in Harry Potter. I don't know why, but I was I was like, he is Dumbledore, right? And my parents were like, no, it's a different actor. I was like, no,
dude, that's wizardist of you.
That's Gandalf.
That is so.
Lucas,
that is so wizardist of you.
I know.
Wow.
You're so wizardist.
I'm a wizardist. Yeah, I don't know. He's the embodiment of wise old wizard, and I was like, is he not the same actor?
It's not every wizard,
He's
just
all
him.
Although something interesting. Yeah, not all.
He was in Hocus Pocus. Did you know that?
Not all wizards are Ian McKellen. I wish they were, but he was interestingly enough, he was approached to play Dumbledore. The new after the Dumbledore from the first two Harry Potter movies, after that actor died, he was approached to pick up the role, but he turned it down because the actor that played the original Dumbledore didn't actually like Sir Ian McKellen as an actor. And and Ian McKellen was like,
drama.
And Ian McKellen said, I was approached by it, but I didn't feel comfortable stepping into the shoes of an actor who I knew didn't like my performance. He was like, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So why
is he?
I understand that he is. Yeah, I thought that was a very, very honorable thing to think and to make.
One of my favorite stories I've heard, and I hate going back to The Hobbit, but it's just because it's more recent. It is more recent, and it has
this episode.
I hate going back to it, but it does make sense. Because Ian McKellen, if you guys don't know the story, during filming for The Hobbit, all of the actors except for Ian McKellen were filmed on the same set because they're all about the same height for their characters. Hobbits and dwarves were very short. Poor Ian McKellen had to film his scenes with the group in a green screen room without them there. So he was just there acting with nobody there. And then apparently this is the story that came out, is that Ian McKellen started crying during filming once because he said, this isn't why I became an actor, to sit in a room by himself and do the scene. And honestly, it's probably the most genuine thing anyone could ever say. And it also speaks to his acting performance. Yeah, and it also just again points back to his his acting ability, because even in those situations where he was just in the room by himself without the other cast there, he was amazing. He still did fantastic.
What a
So,
bad
I had to throw that out there, because if we're going to be throwing praise at Ian McKellen, we need to throw all the praise at him, because he's brilliant.
Badass.
Yeah.
And if I may segue into another pretty epic
Indeed
actor on this, I have to say this. All of the actors are amazing, but one of my all-time favorites is Andy Serkis.
Yes.
He plays Gollum / Schmeagol, and Jesus Christ, that man can act. There is nobody who can play. Again, this is another character that, and I think we're gonna say this for everybody, so I'm just gonna say it one more time. I can't picture anybody else in these movies being played by anyone other than the actor that they have. So, great job casting, guys. It's amazing. But Andy Serkis is fantastic.
Mwah.
The way that he's able to inhabit the person while also contorting his body, you know? Because that is him physically and vocally acting as those characters. And he's just so good. I absolutely adore him.
Such a talented man. Oh my gosh. Because he's also in Planet of the Apes as the main character. So, I mean, he's known for that he's such a great character actor. Not character human as much, but like, well, I mean, he can do that as well.
Creature.
But yeah, he's such
an amazing
good
creature actor.
He is. He just has a way of doing that. Tessa, I don't know if you have are there any actors that stood out to you as well? Because I have one, but I don't want to steal it in case.
I'll add one. Sean Astin? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yes.
The guy who played Samwise. He had a very interesting role, even with like the whole character development of him not really wanting to leave the Shire, but now having to support his friend, or at least try in like any way that he can. I don't know. I really liked his character, and I really liked that he was just such a good friend, and he was so loyal and supportive.
Such a wholesome being.
He deserves some praise too.
Samwise really is like the definition of wholesome and innocence throughout this. He's the only character who remains, who keeps his innocence.
Yeah.
You know? He may be facing like dark times ahead, you know, traumatizing things, PTSD, that sort of thing, but he still finds a way to stay this wholesome person, to only see the good in people. That's true. Well, except for Gollum, but that's a different story. He basically he just protects the people that he loves, you know, and he finds love for everybody as long as they're not, you know, negatively affecting the people that he already loves. So
he is such a strong, optimistic force of will that just keeps driving him forward. And I mean, in some respect, I mean, Frodo, the character, and Elijah Wood is also fantastic in his portrayal of Frodo, especially considering he was only, I think, 19 when he did the story. So I mean, that's incredible. But I think Samwise had, and I mean, Frodo himself had the burden of the ring to deal with, so it wasn't, you know, no one can blame him. I mean, he went such a far distance with that alone. Like, that was an incredible feat. But I have to say, it seems like Samwise had some sort of, Frodo would not have made it without Samwise there as that force of will, and that kind of optimistic force pushing him forward. There's something to be said about Sam's strength. Sam had a definite mental strength to him. The last actor that I would like to point out before we move on to the next focus of The Lord of the Rings is Viggo Mortensen, who portrayed Aragorn. And the reason I wanted to point him out is because, again, I really can't see anybody else playing Strider. I really can't see anybody else doing that.
No.
And he carried this aura of this traveled badass character that he had a complexity there that he was very strong physically, but he was also very strong mentally and very smart, but he also went through an arc himself, and I really appreciated that. But as the actor goes, I think you guys might have heard this story. So Vigo, it's the scene in the Two Towers after Pippin and Merry are captured by the orcs. The Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go on that. They're chasing after the orcs, and they're chasing after Merry and Pippin, trying to save them. And then they come across the pile of dead orcs. Aragorn and Legolas think that Pippin and Merry are dead, and when they find that out, Aragorn, in his rage, he kicks a helmet to the side, and then he falls to the ground yelling. So I was
very well known story.
Yeah, very well known story. So he's crying. He's very upset, and it's this painful cry. And the director Peter Jackson was like, "Wow, that's fantastic. I'm going to keep that." So it's revealed later that Viggo Mortensen actually broke 2 toes when he kicked the helmet, and his scream of pain was real. But he kept on going, and he added that pain into the scene. And I think that's also a true testament of a great actor to go through that, but still stay in character and channel that into the scene. So that's why I wanted to point out his character was because of that, and because of really just throughout the entire story, he maintained this complexity and kind of a Geralt character. But yeah, way to go, Viggo Mortensen. You are the true Aragorn.
Very good. I remember reading about that, and I no longer, every time I see that scene, I'm like, oh, he just broke 2 toes. It's kind of like that thing where Tom Cruise broke a leg on set for Mission Impossible. And I think that they kept that scene when he broke his leg, because he was like doing a jump from one building to another, right? And that's when he broke his leg. And I think they kept that as his scene. Yeah, because he played it off.
Yep.
Yeah. You could, in my mind, I'm just like, oh, he just broke his leg. The same goes for Leonardo. The same goes for like Leonardo DiCaprio, who in what was it? Oh, what was the name of that movie?
I know what you're talking about.
He had a glass in his hand.
Django Unchained.
Yes, that was it. Django Unchained, where he had a glass and he broke it in his hand and he was actually physically bleeding.
Yes,
and
I
he
saw that
played it off, and he kept playing it. It's like actors who can continue to play that scene as those characters, as this is actually happening to them in real life.
Yeah.
I give props to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them do it to a bad extreme. I will say that. Method actors. There are some people who take it to a very unhealthy extreme that I can't condone. But if it's small things like those aren't small things, but you know what I mean. When they're in the moment things that they couldn't control, and they play it off, it's very telling of how good of an actor they are.
Yes.
So, yeah,
that's very true.
Yes.
Goodness.
Not that they go on stage with an actual bat, break their own actual leg, and be like, "I'm ready." And you're like, "No, what did you just do?" Like people like that. Oh no, stop, never.
I'm getting into character.
I have my character broke his leg, correct? Yes. Then I broke my leg.
Well, then I don't see the issue.
I don't see the issue. I was like, we see the issue. You're insane,
dude.
Anyway.
So segueing into writing and directing of Peter Jackson, I wanted to talk a bit about that and about how he showcased it, because he wasn't the only one that wrote it. He had a big team. There were a couple writers for Game of Thrones. I mean, not a Game of Thrones, for Lord of the Rings. I'm getting my fantasy.
How dare you!
Stuff. I know.
Death!
I just committed heresy. But
of the highest order, you must die.
I know. I deserve execution.
Okay, he's
But-
dead now, Tessa. That just leaves you and me.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. So,
Let's
it's
talk about
Peter
that.
Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens. And then that's for Fellowship of the Ring. There might have been more for the rest of the series, but I don't think so. But they are, for starters, the writing is incredible in the way that it carries from scene to scene and envelops us into this world, as we said. But the direction, I really wanted to focus on that because I've seen him talk about his directing, and I've seen a lot of other people talk about his directing. And now, whenever I watch the series, I think about this. He has a lot of shots. Oh, so Steven Sinclair, he was another writer for the series. But Peter Jackson has a lot of shots where he focuses on the eyes of the character, and where you really get to see the emotion, but it's a focus on the eyes, and you sometimes see those Morticia Adams moments where there's the light on the eyes, and you
Less
focus on
dramatic, but
yeah, but there's something to be said. The eyes are the window to the soul, and they convey, I believe, the most emotion in the face. And I think Peter Jackson did a really good job of focusing on that emotion and keeping us in that emotion throughout the series.
I mean,
he
has a story that is highly dialogue driven. Say what you want about all the action scenes that are in it, there are plenty, but if you compare those, because these movies at minimum are 3 hours, if you're not watching the extended cuts,
right.
At the minimum they're 3 hour long movies, and it's not just 3 hours of action compared to like the action scenes. There's an immense amount of dialogue in them, and you have to become very creative in the way you're telling a story when it's dialogue driven, and a story as long as this one is, otherwise you lose the attention of the viewer, and I think his use of focusing in on the eyes and focusing in on people's faces, especially for those moments where words can't happen, you know what I mean? Where you just can't have words. The absolute best example I can give is between Gandalf and I can never pronounce her name.
Galadriel.
Yes.
Galadriel.
That was another actress. Kate Blanchett, you are a goddess. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Those two are the best example of having a conversation with only your eyes.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
They're two extremely talented actors. I mean, like, even Galadriel and Frodo have a moment of just communicating with their eyes. Like, yes, they are talking, but that's voiceover work. They're not hearing that amount of dialogue in the moment. They are looking intently at each other and having conversations with their eyes, and it's extremely well done. That is huge props and huge points to all the actors, and to Peter Jackson as well, who found the importance of showing that conversations don't just happen through what you say. It happens through like how you look at somebody else. Like Frodo looks at Gollum with pity, but Samwise looks at Gollum with like pure rage and distrust and disdain, and Gandalf, Ian McKellen again, Gandalf has these great moments where when he's looking at people he loves and he cares about, he has a softer expression, but when something isn't going right, you son of a took, he'll give you a stern looking at, but if you're like his mortal enemy, it's a completely different look compared to that, it's just, it's so well done, and props to the actors, props to Peter Jackson for seeing that this was very important to use, to focus on the facial, to focus on the eyes. It was really well done.
I mean, he knew what scenes needed it. He knew when it was needed, and he knew when that needed to be showcased, and that's something that every good director needs to be able to do. And
I'm still learning. Peter Jackson, teach me your ways.
teach us your ways. Well, and interestingly enough, so I've kind of been obsessed with storyboards lately, and I found out that Peter Jackson went to great extent to storyboard, I believe, all of the movies. Then he hired like voice actors to voice each of the parts, but the only reason I wanted to throw that in there was to show how dedicated that man was to making sure that this film actually happened in the way that he wanted it to, and happened in a way that would do the story justice, and how much he cared about it, because this film was in production for 8 years. That is a long... These films, plural, that is a long time to be dedicated to not just... Those are 3 films, and, I mean, going through what they had to do themselves, 8 years is honestly kind of short for the scale of these.
2 years per film, you know?
Right.
And that's a long time.
Man, that is true dedication, and you don't often see that. So, again, props to you. Teach us your ways.
Teach us, please.
Yes.
For the love of God, teach us
Please.
your ways.
For the love of God. The last thing I wanted to kind of touch on about Peter Jackson's directing, and then I'll hand it off to you guys if you have anything else to throw in as far as directing and cinematography as well, was the establishing shots of the terrain of the world. You see a lot of those, especially when they're running, and I thought they were fantastic. I thought they fit with the story really well, and they were done in a helicopter, and I think that is like the go-to thing for epic montage of running from one place to another. I think that is the go-to thing when you're like, that's how you do it. You just put Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn in New Zealand, and you just film them running. That's how every film montage works. That's how you just see it.
They were running constantly
throughout
the entire movie.
They had to be fit. Like, you're talking about superhero movies where the actors are fit? No way.
Yeah,
these guys are wearing armor, leather, layers of fabric and clothing,
and
running with heavy things, and they're like walking across New Zealand. It's just like, which one of them was afraid of heights? I forget which one of the actors was afraid of heights, and he had to climb a mountain because he wouldn't take he climbed the mountain. Was it Sean Bean? Yeah, I think it was Sean Bean too. If we're wrong, then I'll put it up. But the story goes is that he's like scared of heights. So instead of taking like the lift up the mountain for a few of the scenes, he actually hiked up the mountain, because he didn't want to be up there. And I'm just like, that's fit, he probably obviously wasn't wearing the like armor or anything that his character is, but like he was still hiking up a mountain to go film a scene, and then he had to hike back down the mountain. It's like,
fucking commitment.
These are actors who don't look stereotypically fit, as you would think. Like, stereotypically fit nowadays is like, you look at superhero movies and the muscles, and then the leather, the tight leather suits and stuff. But like, this is like a different level of being fit and healthy, because they're wearing extreme leather, like an extreme amount of clothing that is like wool, it's armor, and they're carrying weapons too that couldn't have been light. Like, even if the prop master was making them out of foam or something, they're still not, it's insane. They were in shape.
Yes. Absolutely.
And considering like every single take that they had to do, okay, go back to one.
Away. Now go back to your starting point. That's a mile away. We're gonna go refuel the helicopter and we'll be back in.
I also wanted to touch upon the cinematography as well, because that is a very big part of this film. And I'll hand that to you guys first, and then build on whatever you guys will have great points anyway, so I probably won't need to.
It's incredibly
Tessa,
beautiful.
you want to go first? Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to like recollect on some of my favorite shots, but yeah, it was overall just very well done and very I don't know, it was very like personal, like you felt like you were on the journey with them.
Mhm.
And you were like included in their like conversations and their thoughts, and it was very personal, and I really appreciated that. Um and then I guess also it like brings in editing as well, but it was very smooth, and I didn't feel like there was a shot that really like took me out of the world. Like I felt like I was in it for the long run. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the scenes that really establishes the cinematography extremely well, and it's a scene that I think people go to all the time, is when they're at the mountain with the ring. Frodo is about to throw it in, and there's this like insane amount of light on him from the volcano, you know? And it was so great to watch because the lighting complemented what Frodo was feeling at that moment. He's like, I have this power, this thing is the one thing that I love the most. And then you look at Samwise, and Samwise isn't lit the same way because Samwise isn't feeling the same emotions that he is, but they're lit so that they're in the same place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the light plays to the emotional turmoil that the characters are feeling in that moment, but they're they're individual emotions, but they're still connected to the same location and to the same scene. And I think it could have been easily done horribly, where they look like they're in completely different locations, but they aren't. The use of lighting is so well done. I think the elves, the locations of like Arendelle and stuff, have the best lighting in my opinion, and I think it's because the elves are symbolized to be these more quote civilized people. They've been around much longer, so they've mastered like everything. So they have to look well lit, look well educated. You know what I mean? And it literally makes you feel safe. In the world where everything else is like the world is falling apart and the world is dark and dreary and harsh. The Arendelle, the use of lighting in particular just made it feel safe. And I give props to the cinematographer for creating those amazing lighting schemes. It was perfect.
Yes.
Whenever you see elves, like, and this is especially in the case of Galadriel and Arwen and the elves in the forest, there's almost a dreamy quality about them. Like a slight haze around them. It is. And it plays so well.
How could you forget Legolas?
Oh, yeah.
And Legolas as well. It's just the elves have this mystical, magical, radiant
They almost
light
always
around
have
them.
a halo around them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
They
ancient
do.
ones are like
Mm-hmm.
light beings or something.
There's a very almost godly element to them. Almost not quite religious, but in the sense that they're immortal, so they have this power
like
and this inner light.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean that. And when you're talking about the mountain, I mean you feel hot. You really. I watch those scenes and I feel hot. Like that was
like,
incredible.
Where's the air conditioner?
Like
grimy.
am I next to a lava? Like, I mean, that's
it's amazing.
Great surroundings. So the last element of production that I wanted to focus on is just overall production design. So this is hair, makeup, setting, costumes, music, the whole 9 yards, which is an incredibly important aspect of this film. And again, I'll hand this off to you guys to begin with.
Oh my gosh. Where to start?
Right. Everything.
Yeah, I know. All the things.
It's a trap.
Literally? Okay, let's start with costumes, because
Please. Yes.
They were
Thank you.
so well designed for each character and really like expressed who they were. Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
It's really interesting because they have nothing to go off in this case. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly.
So, like, sci-fi films are in the same boat usually. You can go off of anything, but sci-fi is usually like slim, trim, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing like period pieces, you are restricted to what you really can do with costumes. But in this case, it was like very limitless what they could do, you know. Of course they probably focused on more things that are like medieval and Renaissance, you know, but even then that stuff is like very like you can make these costumes look any way that you want them to.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I couldn't imagine trying to design for there are so many characters in this. I can't imagine trying to design for all of these characters and to have the same level of like craftsmanship, or actually not even the same level of craftsmanship, because they're all from different places and that kind of shows, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The elves
they're
are so like
distinct in their designs. Oh my god.
It's just like the elves are always so like proper and every stitch is intentional and everything is elegant and beautiful and fits tailored to them, you know, while the hobbits are very like, it's comfortable, it's nice to wear, but they're kind of like, you know, I need to walk around the Shire, I need to do some gardening and stuff. It's very
it's
like
homey.
that.
Like,
and then
yeah.
exactly. And then like Gandalf's is so like, you know who he is when he's coming. He's wearing like it's just
icon.
Frodo
icon, like fashion icon. I want his robe to wear on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah, I think Gandalf is the most fashionable character in that whole. Lady Galadriel, especially, I think they're the fashion gods of that movie.
I mean, Gollum comes close,
elegance.
But
yeah, his loincloth is something to envy. Yeah. So, another incredible part of the film was the hair and grueling makeup, especially for the orcs. I mean, that...
Oh my god, I couldn't even imagine.
Can you imagine how many prosthetics they went through?
No.
Every single day, or for whatever shot days they had, but still.
Right?
That's like a huge freaking number of people in that amount of prosthetics, and then you're like, how many makeup designers were on set on a regular basis just for those scenes, you know?
Must have had
like of course they used oh my god. Right?
Yeah.
An insane team. And those actors are getting there like hours and hours before they even start filming, because they're like, you need to be in costume. We need to put this giant nose on your freaking face right there. You're just like,
imagine even being like an extra in these films. Like that would be so cool.
Oh my god, I would die of happiness, honestly.
You're just you're another being. Like imagine being an orc extra. You're just you are another creature. I mean, they designed it. It's real. Fantastic job as well. John Williams, another god of music.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Oh my god. Yes.
I mean,
it's flawless. It's incredible. That music.
It can't even be it. It fits the mood so perfectly. You'd think it's from the story itself. You think that people are playing those songs in the film. It's incredible.
It also feels like that music would be playing if you were in that certain area of the world, you know?
Yeah.
Like it would just be playing live around you.
I think that was like very key for a lot of these design attributes, and I have to give props to all the designers who worked on it, is that you're not designing just for a world. You're designing for individual peoples.
Yeah.
You know? You have music and clothing that the elves would listen to or wear. You know, you have music and clothing that the hobbits would listen to or wear. You know, it's all... And then the elves are also very different in themselves, because there's like how many groups of elves living apart from each other? It's
can't even begin.
Very...
Yeah.
I can't even begin design the idea and the process that goes into designing elements for each of these different groups of people, you know? It's
Yeah.
it's
It's
incredible.
both like exciting, but also like, where would you even begin? You know?
Right.
I know, right? It's just
Oh my gosh.
It's like,
I'm looking
yay.
at the
Okay, now
the hair and makeup section on IMDb. I'm looking at the hair and
Yeah.
makeup section,
it's
and
massive.
it's almost the size of the cast list.
wow. I believe it.
Each main
yeah.
cast person had one make. It's like
Yeah.
I can't even begin. God, how many times did they have to like? How many buses of costumes and makeup did they have to lug out to these remote areas to get these
Right?
shots for a day? You know what I mean? It's like,
Round of applause to all the
gosh.
PAs.
Unbelievable.
oh my God, all those PAs running
those
back and
PAs.
forth. No, this isn't my loincloth. This is the other guy's loincloth. Oh God. Runs back to the bus.
The film would not have succeeded had they not succeeded.
Mhm.
Right.
They were key.
Yeah. Yeah. And then them also creating their own languages. Like,
Oh my God, I can't even imagine how long that took.
right?
Well, and that's I think most of those languages were like already created by Tolkien. Like they still had the job of fleshing it out.
Yes,
but that's
right.
another thing.
That's right.
Where they
well, Tolkien, like,
this
I love
story
Tolkien,
in general,
but there's no way.
Oh, he did. I mean, he was a linguist major.
No.
That was
What I
his-
mean,
yeah.
I was waiting for you to finish, but I was like,
Mhm.
I love Tolkien, but there's like no way that he could have like created every single word for this language, you know? Like props
right,
to Tolkien
like-
for even like attempting to do this, you know? And props to the actors and the directors and then the people there who are like, this is what it would sound like. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, because someone had to translate what he did and actually bring it to real.
Mhm.
There's so much, God,
Yeah.
and there's so many elements of collaboration that went into this to make it exist. And the story in it's like the story in itself was there, and you know you could rave about Tolkien and what he was able to do with his story at the time, but as far as the focus on the movies, these people did a fantastic. I mean, fantastic doesn't even cover the just
I can hear
of how.
I mean, I
Sorry,
can hear people right now saying, that it took you 8 years to make 3 movies. You know, Marvel made 20 in 10, and we're just like, and then you list off everything that had to be done. They had to they had to turn this in detail. I don't know if you guys have read or attempted to read the Lord of the Rings books. I still haven't gotten past the first book.
Tried.
It is so detailed. It is so detailed. It looks like a small book. It is a long book, you know, and there's so much detail in it. They had to take all of that detail from those books and put them into movies. And not only that, putting them into 3-hour-long movies for people's enjoyment. Then you have to start writing. You take that script, and then you have to be like, I need costume designers. And then the costume designers have to design something. It gets approved. And then they're like, okay, now I need actors. Because they can't make anything until, you know what I mean? It's like this extremely long process. And then you think 8 years. If you're still thinking, it took them 8 years to make this movie, that's so long. You should be like, it took them 8 years?
Only took
it didn't
8
take them
years?
longer?
Yeah.
It only took 8 years? It's like...
You're like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's just...
like you know that the directors and every single person for like every single day was living, eating, breathing this whole series. Like that's all they were doing. Like,
literally, they were eating the script.
Literally.
It was just like
literally a lot of paper was ingested. Yeah, I think Peter Jackson has said that for 8 years he only got 4 hours of sleep. That he was awake every other waking moment because he was perfecting everything else. I mean, it's
God, I hope I have
insane.
a passion project like that. You know what I mean?
Right?
Yeah.
I would kill for a passion project like that.
It'll
my
come.
gosh.
It'll come.
I mean,
I'll get
'cause
there one
this is-
day.
Yeah, because this series is gonna live. It's gonna live on forever. It's gonna go down in history as one
Yeah.
of the best movie series ever made. So, having talked about all of these wonderful elements of the movie series, I want to ask you first, if you can, what moment? And there are many.
Oh, Lucas, why?
If you could,
Oh no.
you don't have to pick
Oh,
one.
man.
You don't have to pick one. I just want you to think of a moment that really stuck out to you, and it doesn't even have to be it doesn't have to be like your favorite moment of the series, but a moment that stuck out. Either maybe it inspired you, or maybe it the way it was shot, or anything that you would just like to focus on for any reason. I'll go first. I would have to say the moment that I just kind of want to highlight real quick is it has to be um, the in the first movie when Gandalf fights with the Balrog, and that whole chase of them fighting, and that final culmination of
Run, you fools!
and then, and then that
Gandalf!
I think that
Oh.
that scene is so gripping and so fantastic. I know this is a really painful question, so if it's too difficult, that's fine. I have a better question after this. But I just wanted to see. I wanted to see if there were any moments that you wanted to bring attention to that we didn't cover already.
I will
I
give
think-
one.
Okay, go.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'll
Go
give
for it.
one.
Yes.
I think it again comes from the first one. The Fellowship is when the Fellowship is formed, and everyone's there in a meeting. And there's there's the comedic parts of having hobbits that aren't supposed to be there. You know, everyone's arguing about who's going to take the one ring. You know, to go burn it, and then freaking Frodo, who just wants to go home.
Poor boy.
And he stands up, and the poor sweet boy stands up and says, "I'll do it." And nobody's listening to him but Gandalf. And
he hears,
who else
and
was
he's
there?
like,
Elrond.
"Ugh."
You know,
Uh-huh.
Gandalf and like Elrond. And then Gandalf is so heartbroken that he knows that Frodo has to be the one to do it. And I just think it was a really, really great scene. Just that entire thing of just them talking about who is going to take the one ring, and then the Fellowship finally being formed. I just loved it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but both of those moments are really good. I think one of them that stood out to me was at the very end of the trilogy, when they each go their separate ways. I think, to me at least, the message came across that, like, how important it is to get out of your comfort zone and to be uncomfortable, and that when you do that, you actually will realize what it is you want out of life, or what you're called to. Like for Sam, like he wanted to settle down at the Shire and start a family, and that's great. And it was different for Frodo, because now he had like this calling to
of adventure.
Yes, and also that he could no longer live in that comfort zone, because he knew he had a better understanding of what was out there, and that he can actually make a difference. And so I think that was like one of the big moments for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to like a beautiful foreign country, and you see these like beautiful relics of time and this wonderful culture, and then like a week later, you're back in your bedroom eating goldfish and watching Netflix, and you're like,
For a second there, I thought you actually meant real goldfish. And I was like,
No.
no.
The crackers.
You weren't lying. I am actually Gollum in more ways than one. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's like, how can you just go back to that? How can you go back to the way you lived life? You can't. Yeah. Very, very beautiful. Both of those scenes are incredible. So I wanted to ask, do you guys, is there any movie of the trilogy that you prefer the most? Because this is a debate between a lot of people. They have like a certain movie that they prefer out of the trilogy.
It's so
And I
difficult.
wanted to see, right?
This is not an easier question.
I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
Oh, man. Jeez, why?
Yeah. My dad really likes The Two Towers. That's his favorite out of like all. He loves all of them, but he really likes The Two Towers, which is interesting because that's like, I feel like always people's, if they're asked that question, The Two Towers is one you don't hear a lot of because it's kind of the bridge movie. Stuff happens, but it's kind of like
it's more action packed than the other ones.
Yes, it's kind of the build up to the final conflict. But it's still necessary.
It might just be because it's the first one, and because I've seen it more than the other two. I hate saying it because I love all of them so much. I love them all for different reasons.
I personally don't. I think they're all great. I don't think I could pick.
If we're talking about one that I definitely know more about and have seen it the most, then it's The Fellowship. I truly enjoy the start of this adventure, Yeah. Because that's what it is the entire time, is a start to an adventure.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it,
Yeah.
Of course I love the other two as well. I think it's just because I don't see these as three individual movies, because when I sit down and watch Lord of the Rings, I want to watch them succinctly. Right. It feels like one big movie as opposed to three individuals. But really I think it's just because I've seen it. I think it's just because I've seen it the most and I know more about it. It probably is The Fellowship,
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah,
Ditto.
Please don't hate me, Hannah.
I agree wholeheartedly with Megan. Yeah. The first one is definitely my favorite. But just like Megan said as well, like when I think of like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think of it as like three parts of like a whole story, because I mean,
absolutely,
it is the whole story. Yeah. So it is hard to choose, but I think the first one where they're really like opening the book and like, oh my gosh, I can't speak today.
It's such a great setup.
Just like opening the book and being like introduced to this whole new world and the characters. I love it. So yeah, I would choose the first one.
It's so great. Yeah, I mean, ditto to both of you guys. It does such a great job of setting everything up, and I don't think I could pick like it's all one story, so it's so difficult to even think about picking a favorite. But that is I get a lot of joy out of that first movie. There's something special about it. Yeah, well, I believe our journey has come to an end. We have gone there and back again. For now, we're gonna analyze frame by frame of every movie. But as far as a series review in total, I think we've touched on all the main points and gotten the main message across that this is a fantastical movie that if you haven't seen, you're stupid. So yeah,
watch it.
Watch it right
watch
now.
It.
Absolutely. Well,
here come the Eagles, guys.
Yes, now we're going to take the Eagles off to the land of
Isengard, to Isengard.
To Isengard.
Isengard, where we're gonna... But anyways, thank you guys so much for talking with me about this, and
Thanks for joining.
Hannah, this one's dedicated to you.
Happy birthday, my love. I miss you.
Happy birthday. I miss you too. So anyways...
Lucas, don't be a creep.
I miss you too, person I've never met. Remember all those times when
we didn't know each other?
Didn't talk? Remember all those times when we didn't know of each other's existence? Me too. Those were special, unknowing times. Anywho, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed our long spiel for The Lord of the Rings. I know I did. And we will see you next time.
Yeah.
Have a good, everybody.
Yeah. Have a good.